Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman live on your radio. Hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use, no doubt, starts now. This, my fellow Americans, is the broadcast for April 22nd in the year of our Lord 2025. This is our one of two, and the goal always to protect life, liberty, and property, to promote God, family, and country, and do so on your radio and the traditions of our founding fathers. Yes, indeed. We reject revolution unless it's a Jesus revolution. Then we're in because we follow the Prince of Peace. The incredible checks and balances put in place by the founding fathers, one of the peaceful, restorative solutions we have at our fingertips. Welcome to the broadcast. Hope you're all doing absolutely fantastic. Riding shotgun on the broadcast today. Sheriff Richard Mack is back. Hello, Sheriff.
Good morning, Sam. It's great to be back with you this beautiful Tuesday morning.
Is it hot or cold or what in Arizona now?
It's warming up a little bit, but not too bad. So about 89, 90 today.
Okay, well, that's actually delightful weather.
Yeah, pretty good.
You got to like that. All right, before we get started with our guest, I do have a couple of quick stories to bounce off you. Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, is retiring as chairman. And I guess they have this temporary person they put in place over at the WEF. Peter, I don't even know how to say this guy's name. Brabeck-Letmathe. It's a hyphenated last name. Anyway, some dude named Peter. It was unanimous. He's the interim chairman, I guess, by the forum's board. And a search committee has been set up to choose a permanent successor. So what do you think of that? Klaus Schwab stepping down, sir.
Well, fine with me. but they'll just replace the name will change. That's about it. And it'll go on the way it has been.
Yeah, I kind of find that interesting, though. He's stepping down because the guy's old. He's like 87 years old.
Well, I hope that's when I step down.
Amen to that. So one guy out, but as you wisely point out, nothing will change. It's interesting, nevertheless, to keep an eye on, though. But you're right about that. I don't think anything will change. I think they've got their modalities set, and kind of it is what it is. All right, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to announce a ban on artificial food dyes. He's railed against Big Pharma and everything else. He says they're at fault for this. Big food, Big Pharma. It's created an epidemic. And Kennedy will be delivering on a campaign promise to get rid of 8 different food dyes, saying, hey, that's going to help a lot with people's health. A lot of kids have ADHD and all kinds of hyperactivity, and because of these dyes, etc. What do you say, Sheriff?
Well, I've known about the dangers of food dyes for a long time. My mother-in-law Dawn's mom was really into the health foods and whatnot. And so she kind of taught us about a lot about that stuff ever since we were married. Which, by the way, will be 50 years next month.
A huge shout out and congratulations to you guys, by the way.
Well, thanks. But yeah, there's a lot of things wrong with our foods, processed meats, and so on and so forth. But it's good to see that the government's finally catching up with a lot of this stuff that's been out there for decades.
And to me, this is just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah. There's a lot more stuff.
I personally think we ought to be dealing with a lot of the vaccine discussions, and, hopefully RFK will get there. One of the things I find fascinating is this guy sits at the crux of one of the biggest problems in America we have, which is government control of health care and government literally control of what gets approved and what doesn't, and in bed with Big Pharma and everything else, and he sits at the core of that. And, RFK, JR hasn't even been there that long, and they're all, in my opinion, criticizing his efforts, saying he's not getting it done, and da-da-da-da-da. I disagree with that. I think he's making a great start. He's released a lot of people that were there. They're gone now. He's now starting to look into autism. He's now starting to already get rid of a lot of these things that we know are flat out toxins and really bad for health.
Yeah.
I think so far RFK's done a great job.
Yeah, I do too. He has launched an investigation, and it's aimed at vaccinations and autism and maybe a few other problems that vaccinations have caused over the years. And so, yeah, you got to take your hat off to him, and he's heading into areas where, of course, big business and big politics doesn't want him to go, but he's standing for what he believes in, and so far, I totally agree with you. I'd give him a B+ for his efforts and what he's trying to do.
One of the other things I think that's fascinating that he's done is he's pointed out this. A lot of people say, oh, vaccines cause autism. And then others are like, nope, there's no evidence. But there's a lot of anecdotal evidence. There's a lot of cause and effect. And what Bobby's really brought to the table, in my opinion, is he says, hey, this isn't probably one specific thing. There's probably a variety of factors that are making this happen. Environmental, food, the list goes on and on and on. Also, hey, this huge fluoride discussion. You can lay that to Bobby's feet. I don't know that we would have got a lot of that done to ban fluoride in the water if it wasn't for RFK Jr. And, if you like fluoride and believe it's awesome, by all means, you can take fluoride, supplements or whatever else. But taking fluoride out of the water, Utah's the first state to get that done, Sheriff.
Well, yeah, I think that Utah has led the way on a couple of different things, getting back some of their land, and so, yeah, totally. The Kennedys were not really liberals, especially John F. Kennedy. And if you placed him what he was back in the 60s, early 60s, and placed him more in the middle of the Democrats right now, they would shun him and kick him out, and they'd be gone.
For sure.
So the Kennedy name has some bad reputation here and there, but at the same time, they were mavericks, and they stood for a lot of good things. And I like President Kennedy. So.
Now, I think RFK Jr. is a good guy. I don't think he stands for pro-life as much as I would, but I think he's doing a lot of good, and he's shaking it up with Donald Trump and everything else. Last story before our guest that I want to throw out to you. Headline says this: Trump throws full support behind Rep. Andy Biggs for Arizona governor for 2026. TheGatewayPundit.com. Sheriff, what do you think? Andy Biggs going for governor?
Well, he's my congressman, and I will vote for anybody but Andy Biggs.
Oh, shoot. There you go.
So
yeah,
he's since 2017, my Social Security and my wife's has been robbed by Social Security administrators. And the MO is this, Sam. Back in 2017, I was out of work, and I made $17,000 that year. And Social Security came and said, "Well, you made too much money, and so you owe us $6,000, and we paid you too much." And we said, "Okay, you made a mistake, and then you're telling me I have to pay for it." Then they did the same thing to Dawn, and they took Dawn's entire Social Security away for about a year and a half, where she got nothing because they paid her too much. The same thing, same MO, same exact same thing as it happened to me. So I spent a lot of time going to Andy Biggs' office, calling him. I had Rick Dalton call his wife because they're very good friends. He used to be their kid's school teacher, and he never responded once. And he even sent out a postcard to everyone. If you're having trouble with your Social Security, make sure you call our office and see what we can do for you. Never even called. I know Andy Biggs. I kept telling his staff, I thought we were friends. And he never did a damn
friendship
thing.
only goes so far there, Sheriff. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, he's not going to. He's certainly not going to help a constituent, especially when he said that's stuff that's what he does. and so he's never responded. He's never talked to me. And
I think what we need to do is get Kash Patel or somebody and others and say, hey, you know what? How much of this is FBI or CIA or whatever you want to call it, hidden files on, say, you or me or other people? You know, how much does that? Go ahead and skip the break. This is too important. How big of a deal is that when we say, all right, this happens to Richard Mack, then it happens to his wife, and then you kind of go, okay, was there some weird, I don't know what you want to call it, annotations in your file or something like that that triggered this and brought it on? Hey, Sheriff Mack is an enemy combatant or a domestic threat or a. All I'm telling you is that the likelihood of this happening to you and then to your wife, at some point you go, wait a minute, Hunter's running around free. All these different things are happening to all these different people. No harm, no foul for Fauci. We go on and on and on. But yet, hey, Richard Mack now, they're striking at the core of his finances. At some point you go, man, that we've got to dig into this, Sheriff.
Well, yeah, no kidding. And believe me, I'd be the first one to jump on that bandwagon. That why isn't anybody doing anything about this? But it all got settled, and I get my pittance from Social Security now, and Don gets a little bit as well. And so we've been wanting to retire, look at retirement, but we never really could figure out what we would be making with Social Security. And so that's been a huge block for us. But it looks like it's gotten back a little bit to normal now. But I will tell you this segues right in to our guest. Because
it's actually like it was set up that way, huh?
Well, no, yeah, I guess, but it wasn't. Because Rick Dalton, because he is such good friends with Andy Biggs, I have asked him to take it to him about Sheriff Scott Jenkins. And the reason we have Sheriff Scott Jenkins on with us today is that I want Rick to show him all the horrible things that have happened to Sheriff Jenkins, his arrest, his conviction, his sentencing of 10 years in prison. And we want Andy Biggs obviously has Trump's ear, and so we want him to take it to him that he needs a pardon. If he does that, then I'll probably change my mind. If he doesn't do it, then I'm going to go right on as before. But he has a chance to help set a horrible injustice backwards and change it. And he has a chance to bring this to President Trump. And I didn't know President Trump was going to endorse him. I'm actually kind of surprised that he has, but I think this will help us. And the CSPOA has one big, huge goal right now, and our top priority is to get Sheriff Scott Jenkins a pardon or commute a sentence, whatever. I believe he deserves a pardon. He's never committed a crime in his life, and that's exactly what we're going to talk to him about today.
Sheriff Jenkins, welcome to Liberty Roundtable Live, sir.
Thank you for having me. Good to be with you.
I want to start out this discussion and say the mainstream press has a lot of headlines about you, and I didn't want to mention them to the audience yet. What I really want to do is start out and let you tell your story. You've been in law enforcement for quite a while. You were elected several times. Give us kind of who you are and kind of the story from your perspective, sir, will you?
Okay. I'm a hometown boy there in Culpeper, Virginia, raised and lived there all my life. I became a deputy sheriff at 18, and I've done nothing but law enforcement for 34 years until my retirement date. I was sheriff for 3 terms, total of 12 years from 2012 until the end of 23. Along through my career, I worked in pretty much every position in the sheriff's office and gained a lot of respect for the sheriff's office as a unique type of law enforcement compared to other agencies across the country, federal, state, local. And Sheriff Mack and I met after me reading his book and learning his story years ago. I had really taken an interest in, the powers of sheriffs and what the sheriff's office means to our country. And Sheriff Mack was great at furthering my education on that for sure. But I think that is the crux of, from the time I took office in 2012, I had issues that did become a lightning rod. I had tried educating my staff on the threat of Islamic terrorism from extremists and so forth, and had provided some training from certain people to my office and looking at things that were a known threat. That was before ISIS was even known what the word was. But,
Well, let me interrupt you there, Sheriff Jenkins. Let me wait. Let me interrupt you. Sam, before he was in office 6 months, he had me come out and do the constitutional training for his entire office. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. So we got to
see. So that's what I'm talking about. You got Don's or Sheriff Mack and Sheriff Mack's wife. They give stuff with Social Security. They give me all kinds of problems and grief. Now they go after Scott Jenkins. It seems like there's a thread here, and that's what I'm talking about markings on files, Sheriff Mack. I know that sounds conspiratorial, but at some point, how dumb do you have to be to connect the dots, right?
Yeah. So anyway, keep going, Sheriff. Keep going.
Sure. And that I talk about those early days when I was first in office, 2012. I hit the ground running, changing the office in many ways and updating, modernizing things, training equipment, other things. And we had a great first term. I could go on and on about our accomplishments that I campaigned on, but the things to do with what we're talking about today, what put me in the sights of the liberal agenda and so forth was things just like that. When I had that individual provide training to my office, I had set it up through our regional training academy to get in-service credit, and I had people coming from as far as Arizona to New York and Pennsylvania and other states. Our state police in Virginia, as well as other large counties like Fairfax, all had people coming to my training. It was a seminar, simply a 3-day training seminar on the Islamic extremist threat, and it was taught by a retired FBI agent who specialized in that field. Before that training could take place, the CARE, the head guy out of D.C., and others that he had contacted were hounding my regional academy to the point that they shut it down and took away our in-service credit and wanted me to cancel the training, all because it didn't fit the agenda of the Obama administration. And the AG, when AG Holder's office calls a local sheriff like me, small town sheriff an hour out of D.C., and says, hey, if you will stop this training, we will provide you all the training you like on that subject, as well as, hey, how about we have your SWAT team come on down to Quantico, and we'll spend a few days giving them some specialized training. Is there anything else we can do for you? What can we do to make you stay away from this guy providing this training for your group? And I kept thinking at that moment, I thought, well, if they want that small town sheriff's office training stopped that bad, that the AG's office of the United States is phoning to stop it. And I dug a little deeper, and I realized that the guy providing it, John Guandolo, he had been a target for them for quite a while too. And to me, it sounds like you must be over the target if they're coming at you that hard.
I've been this training too.
I say that because as a background going forward, that probably caused my name or me to be somehow in the sights maybe for things of that nature. And then moving forward, looking at the border security issue, I mean, thank God we had President Trump for that first term, and I, along with a lot of sheriffs from around the country, supported his agenda on, closing the border and securing our country. And, as we said back then, every county's a border county. I know I raised a lot of eyebrows when I started beating the drum that in my little county, an hour out of D.C. now, an hour in the White House, we have Jalisco New Generation cartels conducting human trafficking, sex trafficking, money laundering, weapons, automatic weapons trafficking, and so forth in a county 1 hour from the White House. Now, it fell on deaf ears everywhere from our regional task force to others that we were part of that didn't want that publicity out there, of course, during the years of the Biden administration. They basically said, it's not true. Now, we had my detectives and others on federal task force with HSI and others that that had active cases that could prove all of that. And the more I would try to have, hot topic issues like that raised, whether it's in the local media to the state or, national level, it would quickly be shut down because it wasn't something they wanted talked about. And they knew that as a sheriff, we didn't answer to city councils, we didn't answer to mayors and, so forth. So we had that freedom to speak and educate our community and the public. And they didn't like that message that I was getting out, being blunt and open with people to say, look, this problem is in Virginia. We're not a border state geographically, but it's affecting all of America, and we need to wake up. And, so thank God we've got Trump back in office now, and, we have people like Tom Homan and others doing what they're doing. It's saving our country. I mean, it truly is saving countless lives. We'll never know. But I say that because those are just some of the things that would have drawn attention to me. But, obviously I'm most probably well known for 2020 taking on Governor Northam over the Second Amendment and them trying to ban AR-15s and high-cap magazines. And, I got that notoriety in early 2020 by going toe-to-toe with the committees and the legislature and threatening Northam, and then that I would swear in thousands of citizens to the auxiliary deputies, if need be, to allow them to keep their AR-15s and high-cap magazine pistols and so forth to be available for call-up if I need them as an auxiliary, and that would allow them to keep those weapons. And ultimately, that's nullification of a bill from the legislature. And at that point, it went to review and out of committee to sit and die a slow death. And so I guess, I, along with some others, worked to defeat that bill. And then later I doubled down on it. Of course, COVID hit, and that kind of squashed a lot of things going on in the government. But later, just before I was approached with this case where I've been charged and convicted, just prior to that, I did do D.C. There were some border sheriffs to do a press conference with Chip Roy and some other congressmen. Afterwards, I did an interview, and Breitbart and I think a couple other well-known media outlets, they wanted to know if, because of my 2A stance, if that were to happen from Congress passing a gun ban, would I have that same approach with the Biden administration and others to give them a message? And I gave them a clear message, and yes, sheriffs from around the country could do what I do. I'm not bound by my county borders in Virginia. I can swear in people from anywhere in the state. I have full-time deputies that come to work from 2 counties away, so what would stop me from swearing in thousands of citizens wherever to be able to keep their weapons and so forth? And saying that we should enlist other sheriffs, sheriffs from each state, if Congress were to ban the weapons, I think that definitely got the ire of some of the people, maybe at DOJ or,
Well, and to be very clear,
to,
Congress doesn't have authority to ban weapons, ladies and gentlemen. Your Second Amendment is a God-given, inalienable right of self-defense. The general government has codified it in the Second Amendment that you have the right to keep and bear arms, and that right shall not be infringed. Congress has no authority there. They need to understand that clearly. But let me lay this out. There's a headline that says former sheriff, Culpeper County, is that how you say it?
Culpeper.
Okay, Scott Jenkins has been sentenced to 10 years in, quote, federal prison, they say, for accepting more than $75,000 in exchange for appointing what they call unqualified individuals as auxiliary deputy sheriffs. That's what you got convicted of. Let's come back and talk about this in detail, because I don't even know what a qualified sheriff's deputy means. Don't people have to go to training or, aren't there certifications, or do you have to be qualified in advance? We're playing games here, and I'm convinced that the good sheriff's, profile was marked somehow for hostile attack by government. We'll talk about it in seconds with Sheriff Mack and Sheriff Scott Jenkins on Liberty Roundtable Live.
Your daily Liberty News Wire. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
News this hour from townhall.com. I'm Rich Thomason. A 7-2 Supreme Court ruling pauses Trump administration deportations of illegal aliens suspected of gang involvement. The order is coming under fire from some legal scholars. Constitutional attorney Mark Weaver tells the Salem Radio Network the High Court ran roughshod over its own rules.
This was not well done by the Supreme Court. Remember, the Supreme Court is the court of last resort. It's supposed to only step in after the lower courts have fully made it clear what's happening. That's in the rules. That's in previous rulings by Chief Justice Roberts, that you have to establish your record.
That's part of the objection raised by dissenting Justices Alito and Thomas. Harvard University suing the Trump administration for withholding $2 billion in federal funds, citing the school's alleged refusal to enact changes aimed at fighting anti-Semitism. At the Vatican, the first steps are now being taken to choose a successor to the late Pope Francis. Steeped in centuries of church tradition, the BBC's Sarah Rainsford says it is a carefully choreographed process.
We've seen the papal apartments officially sealed with wax. We are now expecting on Wednesday the Pope's body will be moved in a procession from his apartments to St. Peter's Basilica, where his coffin will be placed there, ready for people, heads of state, and then eventually for ordinary people to be able to come and say goodbye.
The Pope's funeral is scheduled for Saturday at 4 a.m. Eastern Time. The International Monetary Fund downgrading its global economic growth forecast. The IMF predicts the worldwide economy will grow 2.8% this year. That is down from its January forecast, 3.3%. Wall Street, the Dow is up 568 points. More on these stories, townhall.com.
3 years ago, I wrapped up a run of Annie playing Daddy Warbucks with the South Carolina Children's Theater. I was about 50 pounds overweight, tired, sick, fed up with the way I felt. Hi, it's Mike Gallagher. I had to do something. I scheduled my weight loss consultation with PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition. And as they say, the rest is history. Just a few months, I lost over 50 pounds. I took control of my health. 3 years later, I've kept the weight off and I feel better than ever. If you are where I was, do what I did. Call PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition. It'll change your life. It's fast, it's simple. They won't let you fail. Just give them a call at 855-696-2020 to schedule your weight loss consultation. That's 855-696-2020. 855-696-2020. Here's the best part. First 11 callers who mention the keyword healthy will get 2 free weeks added to their weight loss package. Don't wait. Call today. 855-696-2020. Mention healthy to get 2 free weeks. Or visit them at myphdweightloss.com. myphdweightloss.com.
Introducing PrepStartsNow.com, your ultimate guide to readiness and peace of mind. We offer practical preparedness tools, training, and education to take your family's household readiness to the next level. Browse the prep shop for essential products, check out our planning guides, and stay informed with our prep blog. Visit PrepStartsNow.com and subscribe to our emails for exclusive offers, new products, and future events. Remember, preparedness begins with PrepStartsNow.com.
Former Sheriff Richard Mack recounts in his book The Proper Role of Law Enforcement, how he came to realize while working as a beat cop how wrong the all-too-common orientation of police officers is when they think of their job as being to write tickets and arrest people. Richard Mack tells of his personal transformation from by-the-number cop to Constitution-conscious defender of citizen safety and freedoms. Learn what it really means to serve and protect. Purchase your copy at CSPOA.org. That's CSPOA.org.
My brother and 2 other boys were the ones that got in the car with her, and she was drunk. The road that goes to her house is like really windy, and she was taking that road at 80 to 100 miles per hour and hit into the road barriers. Her door flung open. She ran out across the street to get away from it, and the other 3 boys were trapped in it, and the car exploded. And then when my mom found out about it, she called me at work. I don't care what you have to do, just get up here to the hospital. You know, I parked my car and I went inside, and they took us back to this little room. My mom told me that Jay had been killed, and I lost it. The other people, because they're like, well, you can drink, but just be careful when you drink, you know? So I don't want anything to do with it, because it took my brother away from me.
A public service message from The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
Well, welcome back, everybody. This is the Liberty Roundtable Show, and we have an amazing guest, Sheriff Scott Jenkins. And Sheriff Jenkins, we were just about getting into your conviction. What did they convict you of exactly?
Well, they have convicted me of accepting bribes, allegedly, and then in addition to that, there's some additional charges without being too detailed. It has to do with honest services fraud is what they call it. It's all one ball of wax as far as the overarching theme is that I supposedly accepted bribes instead of
so
campaign
you were talking
donations.
about that,
and
you were talking about that right before the break, and Sam brought up that you took like $75,000 and you gave big donors a position on your posse. And the posse, let's make it real clear. The posse, I had a posse, a lot of people had posse. Sheriff Joe Arpaio had 2,500 on his posse in Maricopa County. The posse is generally made up of volunteers from the community, and they're not deputies. They're not police officers. They're not certified as peace officers. No one ever pretends that they are. And that's one of the rules for posses, is that you cannot go around stopping people for traffic violations or, going into a store or around school and start shaking people down and whatever else. That's not allowed. In fact, just about every sheriff's office in the country has an auxiliary posse, and it's called the Search and Rescue Squad. Would that be accurate?
that is correct, yes.
Yeah. So they set up a sting to go after you, and they had some guys that were in trouble that had to go after you to work off being in trouble with the law themselves. That is also correct, right?
Exactly. They had an individual who was I trusted to supervise and run my auxiliary deputy program from the time I became sheriff. I had known him well, and he had his own search and rescue. Virginia Airborne Search and Rescue was his baby that he had initiated years before that, and that's how I got to know him. And I wanted the same thing, task performed in my office at a free, volunteer basis, and he headed that up for me.
Let me put this into perspective for our audience, just real quickly. If you were guilty of accepting, quote, bribes, then every politician in this country, especially every president that has ever been, would also be heading to prison because of this one thing. People who give large contributions to presidential campaigns or senatorial campaigns, they're always handed some sort of job within their administrations, whether it be a senator, congressman, or the president of the United States. Trump has done this. He did it his first term. Biden has done this. Obama has done this. Clinton has done this. JFK did it. FDR did it. And maybe even Thomas Jefferson. This is the thing. You donate big to their campaigns, and then later on, the president will appoint you to his cabinet or make you an ambassador to France or Germany or England or Zimbabwe. And that happens routinely, does it not?
It certainly does. And, in the executive branch, whether you're a governor, president, sheriff, a position where you appoint staff at your discretion,
right.
That's the crux of it. Any of those people in other positions similar to a sheriff that appoints staff could be accused of that tomorrow. Anyone in our nation. And I say this because right now, if there's any sheriff listening or anyone that knows a sheriff to pass this on to, what has happened to me, I don't think the 3,000 plus other sheriffs in the country have thought about the fact that with this standing, if this stands, every one of them can be a target for something years ago that they aren't even aware. I mean, it took one guy getting pinched by the feds on tax evasion and facing 100 years in prison and millions of dollars he had cheated on his taxes. He owed millions in taxes and was facing decades and decades in prison. And he said, well, now supposedly, that's if you believe everything they say, supposedly that's how it got going. But there's more I could say and won't take the time for it. But the bottom line is any sheriff, let's say an individual runs for sheriff in his county and maybe he's not familiar or politically connected with everyone. I mean, you got huge counties in this country that, garner more votes and have more citizens than congressional districts and things. So, campaigns of various sizes, but when you get a campaign going and you have, this one individual that is the most politically connected in your community and you want to support, and the sheriff ends up, a sheriff candidate makes an agreement with someone saying, look, I'd like you to run with me as a partner, kind of like a VP in a presidential election, and say, well, yeah, I'll make you my chief deputy if we win. Yeah. Then, right. if you promise that, and that chief deputy candidate that runs with you on the ticket and publicly says, this is my guy, you work together and he writes you a check for, I don't know, $1,000 or something to your campaign. I mean, he's running with you as a partner, as a number two guy, and you win the election and you give him that job that pays, six figures or whatever as a chief deputy. Well, haven't you done exactly what they accused me of doing then? And I can tell you, I can name, in my own county years ago, it was a good example. It's happened where people run, make those promises publicly. I mean, look not long ago.
Except yours was less. Yours was less, though. Let's make the differentiation here. You did not make somebody an undersheriff becomes a peace officer for the state of Virginia. A posse member does not. And so yours is even less. Yours is more innocuous than theirs.
Exactly. These are just volunteer positions with almost all of them have no weapons issued, uniforms, arrest powers, anything. A few do if they had prior law enforcement experience and training and so on. I had certain ones like that were classified and allowed to, to carry and do those things. But the oath, taking the badge and the ID card is what they're getting in exchange supposedly for this alleged bribe. These donations to my campaign is what they were. And I didn't have those conversations with the individuals. This other guy allegedly, this guy Kevin allegedly had it for me, supposedly at my behest. And that's what they convicted me with, was this guy who's facing 100+ years in prison saying, no, Scott told me to do this for him, and he's been doing this for years, and he's this awful guy, and blah, blah, blah. And then when it comes to the money, they make it sound as though there's this 95, 75, they've got different numbers they use. No, the honest part of it, it's only like 20 grand actually. That other big chunk, that is totally separate and it's a long story, but that's one of the other individuals they accused of crimes and he was facing prison. And they had him change his story from the truth, which was nothing but there were several, it was money loaned and partnered with me both from this individual who'd become a friend of mine and an auxiliary deputy. And we had partnered in some business ventures. For one example is Make Virginia Great Again apparel and stuff. After the blackface incident with Governor Northam, I copyrighted Make Virginia Great Again and had red hats and shirts and things produced. Tens of thousands of dollars of those. Actually, I still have a ton of them sitting in storage now because COVID hit and shut it all down. But nonetheless, a lot of that figure that you're talking about, that was nothing more than a business venture he and I went into. And there's even documentation on 35,000 of it where it was done on normal, with collateral and so on. They're like a regular bank loan. That was there as black and white proof, but none of that ever gets talked about in the court case and the news media and things about, no, the vast majority of that money was nothing more than a business venture and a loan between Scott and this other individual who they just happened to go charge him with crimes and get him to...
You want me to tell you why this is all happening, ladies and gentlemen? Listen to this headline from the Daily Caller and see if it relates, Sheriff Mack. Okay. So I'll give you the headline, then Sheriff Mack can respond, and then we'll have Sheriff Jenkins respond as well. Here's the headline, though. Director of National Intelligence. It's called DNI. I don't know if you knew about that in the government, but there's a Director of National Intelligence, DNI. Currently, it's Tulsi Gabbard. And Tulsi Gabbard just declassified documents from the, quote, Biden administration, revealing how, quote, domestic terrorism was used as a, quote, pretext to attempt to curb gun rights and target misinformation. Daily Caller. So, Sheriff, we got declassified documents that literally say if you stand up for the right to keep and bear arms, if you stand up with Donald Trump against the border, if you, you're literally declassified documents are saying, hey, you've been flat out targeted as a misinformation agent, as a domestic terrorist, a domestic threat. You look at what happened to you and your wife and me and all these different people and all the J6ers. And now they're going after sheriffs because what they want to do is destroy the office of sheriff. And so they want to say, hey, he put people in positions that they weren't qualified for. I don't even know what position you're not qualified for. If you're an American and somebody wants to deputize you, the sheriff has authority to do that. And at some point you just go, this is a flat out blatant targeting. The declassified documents document it. Now you say, well, Sam, how do you know that Jenkins' issue is tied to that? We don't. But we need to be able to follow the money. We need to be able to follow the paper trail and find out. Sheriff Mack.
Well, you know, Sam, what Sheriff Jenkins was bringing up, and what you alluded to as well, is that these undercover operatives already knew Sheriff Jenkins. He'd already been working with one of them, and they were facing lifetime in prison. And so isn't that a bribe? When government, FBI goes to them and says, hey, you're facing 100 years in prison, we'll cut that back or we'll set you free completely if you'll go after Jenkins for us. You're bribing them with less time in prison. And these guys did lie in some cases. However, they didn't need to lie at all. If he is guilty of what they said, every politician would be going to prison tomorrow, and including me, because as Sheriff Jenkins knows, we offer a badge and a wallet for a fundraiser for our posse, for our CSPOA posse. I'm telling them right now, come and arrest me, because we sell a beautiful, authentic badge, just like any cop has in his pocket or coat or whatever, wherever he puts it. We have that.
Now, let's be clear, though. It designates the proper role, though. You're a volunteer participant in supporting the sheriffs around the country, though. This isn't a deputized position in the sense of you got to have qualifications or no. You know, where's the lines here and who defines those lines? And that's where the federal government's really off the rails. Your court case proves they don't have authority to meddle in state and local municipalities and jurisdictions, right?
Right. And I want to reiterate what Sheriff Jenkins said. He came out public and said that he would deputize everybody in his county. In other words, make them all a member of his posse and make sure that they were ordered and required to keep and bear arms so that they could be protected from the governor's gun control and Biden's gun control. And so it was a great, very innovative and creative idea, but it put him on the radar. And yes, he was a marked man. Go ahead, Sheriff Jenkins, with your comment.
Yes. Just as a pretext to get people's head around it a little bit, I think sometimes it helps when I explain. And again, I say this if even if it's just a short few minutes from this point forward, a sheriff in the country is listening. Think about this. You know, there is a reason that, and I'm not just saying the Biden administration, because we know, look at what Trump is facing with the deep state. And maybe people don't even like that word. They consider us conspiracy theorists and so on if we say it that way. But
we're beyond all that, Sheriff.
These deep entrenched employees that have been there in these federal agencies so long. I mean, think about it from the Obama years forward alone. So these guys are there and they see a small town sheriff. And let's face it, I mean, I have a small department an hour out of D.C. in a rural county. I mean, I'm nothing compared to like an L.A. sheriff or, Miami-Dade or others. It's a small little office. But if one sheriff can get other sheriffs across the country to wake up and stop for a minute and think. As I said in one of my speeches over in Maryland one time, I remember it really struck a nerve with the deep state as well as the media when I said, look, for those of you who keep this rhetoric up about who is he, he's not a constitutional scholar. How dare he say that the Supreme Court's rule on, weapons in common use and that the Second Amendment is in jeopardy and so on, and that this small town sheriff is going to supposedly say, well, I'm the authority and I'm interpreting it as, a constitutional right. That's not your place. You're the sheriff. You enforce the laws and period. That's where it ends. Well, you could look at it that way until you think about, well, no, I'm from Virginia. And Culpeper County sits just a couple counties away from Caroline County. And for those who don't know, that's where the Loving case comes from. In 1958, deputies went out and made an arrest of a couple because the man was white and the woman was black. 100 years after our Civil War, we should have known by then that, all men are created equal and so forth. Well, if that sheriff had said to those deputies, no, on its face, I know that's unconstitutional. You will not make that arrest. Or if they'd make the arrest, fire those deputies and release them immediately and say, look, this is unconstitutional. I will not allow this to happen. But no, it took 10 years and a Supreme Court ruling to say, yeah, that arrest was wrong. Well, it's the same way when it comes to this one. I've got a Supreme Court ruling that says the weapons in common use and the most common use rifle in the country for sporting is an AR-15. Then you're going to ban that, supposedly not violating what the Supreme Court's already ruled on. No, as a sheriff, I'm gonna sit, and I pondered it, and I had thought long and hard. I'd done my legal research. I checked to see how many people is there a limit how many I can swear in? The only restriction of that was some county ordinance my county had initiated long before I was sheriff, saying that they wouldn't have over X percentage of auxiliary compared to full time, but I'm not bound by that and so forth. So anyway,
to me, this is an interesting discussion, though. Because the sheriff is supposed to uphold the law, but what is the law? The supreme law or some edict from on high, whether it be the courts or anybody else that conflicts with the supreme law? That's really what you got to look at. What is the law?
And the foundation is the Constitution, period. That is what we have to start with. Now, you can enact laws all day long in state and federal level, and, they can fight it out there. That's why there are three branches of government, and that's the part that they can't get through their head is that we are look at Trump now. Look what they're doing to our president. Thank God we got him, but they cannot let the executive branch execute and do the executive work of executing on their duties. And that's what a sheriff does. And they can't stand the fact that we can choose. A sheriff can choose how to direct his resources. If I don't want to enforce and put time on traffic law, or I don't want to put time on X, Y, and Z codes, and I want to focus it on maybe drug trafficking or cartel activity, or maybe I just want to go out and, play politician and do all the warm and fuzzy stuff. Sheriffs have wide latitude in their discretion, just like a governor, president, anyone else heading an agency like that. They're elected to office on a platform, and they got 4 years to perform. The voters will keep them or not, and during that time, they're given that authority to hire, fire, and make their policies as they choose. And that's what they can't stand at the federal level. They realized, and people like Sheriff Mack, myself, and others were waking them up, jolting them, and making them realize, well, son of a gun, a small town local sheriff is elected directly by the people, and there is no one in United States law enforcement that can compare to that. Every other law enforcement leader in America is appointed by a mayor, a city council, a governor to a superintendent of state police, a FBI director by a president, There's sheriffs are unique, and for someone to wake up the nation, the citizens, to realize, well, wait a minute. Let's look at Sheriff Mack's case. Well, let's look at Jenkins over here. Yes, we as sheriffs are that last line of defense when it comes to them violating something as basic as our Second Amendment right. I thought of a way that no other sheriff had ever thought of, and it goes to show no other sheriff wanted to jump on that bandwagon either when I said I would do it. There was no one quick to say, well, I'll do the same. No, they didn't want that attack because they saw what came at me. And I understand it. I'm not saying other sheriffs are good or bad or what have you. It's not that. It's just I'm trying to wake people up to realize if you allow this to stand, where they come after. I mean, this is one of the most easy things to accuse someone and convict them. And I mean, I had a Charlottesville jury. I mean, look at Trump sitting in New York. He got convicted of twice as many felonies as me. No surprise. I mean, look at the jury pool. Look at what they're able to put up with the he said, she said. I mean, there are so many things in my case I could talk for hours about that are so frustrating that you can't fight. They dumped a terabyte of information on my attorneys to try to prepare for a court case, and people can look it up what that equates to. It's 1,300 filing cabinets of paper, what my attorneys would have had to go through to try to and you know, long story short, I lost, yes. But what did they put on in court? Well, if you're able to convince a jury who's not trained in law enforcement, who doesn't understand what they're being told, and I compare it to this crap that you feed high school and college students. We have you can go to a college campus, stop a random student now and ask them, is hate speech illegal? And they will tell you, yes, absolutely. And when you say, okay, what is that? Well, that's the most protected speech, in my opinion. But, you know, freedom of speech and, yes, hateful speech or ugly speech, that has to be protected as well. But we have this crap that gets fed in the media. And once that narrative is fed long enough, they believe it. And the same thing happens in these cases where you pitch this stuff about, well, a sheriff can't do this. A sheriff can't hire officers and not train them. The hell they can't.
That's what they tried to tell Richard Mack, and then Richard Mack won at the Supreme Court, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the bottom line is we're calling for Donald Trump to pardon Sheriff Scott Jenkins because this is an absolute witch hunt. This is wrong. It needs to be stopped. And what we need to do is literally, whether it's Tulsi Gabbard declassifying information or whatever the case may be through depositions and discovery and due process and everything else. Hey, did you get the chance for appropriate due process to lay out what really happened? No. And now they're rioting about due process for an illegal alien. What about due process for Sheriff Scott Jenkins, Sheriff Mack?
Well, he didn't get it.
They convinced.
Yeah, the judge in the case was really out to lunch, and he gave wrong instructions and wouldn't allow evidence. And so that's why Sheriff Jenkins lost, and the jury was misled and kind of ignorant about what really was going on. So, Sam, do we want him to stay over, or do we have somebody else coming on next hour?
We have somebody else coming on, but that doesn't mean we can't keep the good sheriff a little longer if he's got time. Because what I'd like to do is spend a little... all right, stay here. I'd like to spend a little bit of time on the due process side of this thing, because as far as I can tell, you know, they say that you got bribes. But you know what? Bribes is a pretty hard thing to discuss when you get down to it. It's very hard to tie that. I mean, look, Joe Biden took bribes. He literally flat out, it's documented, but no one seems to care about that. So why does it apply different for Sheriff Scott Jenkins versus, you know, Joe Biden? Now, when we say unqualified individuals.
Who was the victim, though, on this, Sam? There was no victim. You go to bribe somebody, you get them to do something they wouldn't normally do. Oh, and I'm going to pay you if you do get this favor. Nobody got any special favors. Anybody could have gotten it. They already had people on the posse and their search and rescue. And somebody makes a donation and you get an auxiliary post. What? Oh, okay. Well, let's send all those people to prison then. This is so stupid. This is so ridiculous. And let me reiterate, Sheriff Scott Jenkins has never committed a crime in his life.
Where is President Trump when we need him the most, though? This is something that you know we could solve in an instant. We need to push for a pardon for Scott Jenkins, ladies and gentlemen. This is serious business. When Sam Girard went to prison, an Amish farmer, when now Scott Jenkins goes to prison, where are the vanguards? Where are the people to protect and provide due process? Oh, they're rioting overseas for some illegal gang member. We don't have time to work for Scott Jenkins. We got to promote this illegal thug that we pretend is a family man, right? Spend tax dollars to go overseas and battle that international discussion. It's a cover to prevent us from getting to the bottom of real criminal activity by the deep state, ladies and gentlemen. Hang tight. Hour 1 in the can. Hour 2 coming up. God save our republic.